The celestial accord dropped out of hyperspace with a brilliant flash, and Ambassador Valeran's stomach lurched violently. Through the ship's wide viewing port, the blue-green marble of Earth hung against the endless black backdrop of space, clouds swirling across its surface like brushstrokes on a canvas. Beautiful but deadly, like so many things humans touched. "Status report," he barked, straightening his ceremonial robes and trying to shake off the lingering effects of faster-than-light travel. "Holding position at 50,000 kilometers, Ambassador," First Officer Rovas replied, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "Earth's defense grid is tracking us. Multiple weapon systems locked on our position." Valeran nodded curtly. After 3 decades of watching humans expand across the galaxy like an unstoppable virus, infecting one star system after another, the High Council had finally decided enough was enough. Time to put these upstarts in their place before they grew too powerful to contain. "Open communications," he ordered, squaring his shoulders. The main screen flickered to life, showing 2 humans, Admiral Kessler, a stern-faced woman with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and General Lindholm, whose bushy mustache seemed to have its own angry personality, bristling with barely contained aggression. "This is Ambassador Valeran of the Galactic Confederation. Your species' unauthorized expansion ends today. Submit to our authority, or face immediate military action." He let the threat hang in the air between them. Kessler and Lindholm exchanged glances. To Valeran's surprise and growing unease, they actually smiled, not the nervous grins of defeated foes, but the confident smirks of predators. "Funny," Lindholm said, twirling his mustache like some villain from an old human entertainment feed. "We were about to say something similar to you folks." "This is your final warning," Valeran snarled, his composure cracking. "Choose your next words carefully." "Oh, we choose war," Kessler replied, her voice ice-cold and filled with dark amusement. "And you might want to take a look at your homeworld's coordinates right about now." Rovas's fingers flew across his console in a panic. His purple skin turned pale, then ashen. "Ambassador, something's wrong. I can't contact the homeworld. All channels are dead." "You choose war?" Lindholm's grin turned predatory, showing too many teeth. "Say goodbye to your planet." Valeran's blood ran cold as the transmission cut out. He turned to his crew, expecting them to dismiss the human threat, but the terrified look on Rovas's face told him otherwise. As silence settled over the bridge, alarms blared. Earth's response had already begun. The first strike was not theirs to make. Commander Rovas stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as 10,000 ships emerged from hyperspace around Earth. His mandibles clicked with satisfaction, antennae twitching at the sight of the blue-green world below. The humans had refused to surrender, so now they would learn the price of defiance, just like every other species that had dared resist the Confederacy. "Launch the first wave," he ordered, settling into his command chair. "Show these primitives the might of the Confederacy. Let them witness true power." Dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like a meteor shower, their hulls glowing red-hot from entry. Rovas expected the humans' orbital defenses to open fire, but they remained silent. His unease grew as the ships continued their unopposed descent. Something felt wrong. No race had ever allowed an invasion force to approach unopposed. "Commander," his sensor officer called out, mandibles trembling, "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface. They're unlike anything in our database." "Explain," Rovas demanded, leaning forward in his chair. "They appear to be—" The officer never finished his sentence. Brilliant beams of light shot up from the ground, catching dozens of ships in their path. But instead of explosions, the vessels simply disappeared. Clean holes were carved through his formation, leaving nothing but empty space where warships had been moments before. No debris, no wreckage, just void. "What in the void?" Rovas snarled, jumping to his feet. "Report! Someone tell me what's happening!" Captain Kessler's face appeared on his command screen, wearing a grim smile. His battle-worn features carried an almost predatory satisfaction. Like our little surprise, Commander? Turns out those primitive particle accelerators we've been building weren't just for research. We've had decades to prepare for this day. More beams lanced upward, each one erasing another chunk of his fleet. Rovus watched in horror as ships simply ceased to exist, their matter completely annihilated. The screams of his crew cut off mid-transmission as entire battle groups vanished. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," he shouted, his proud voice now tinged with panic. But the humans had positioned their weapons perfectly. Each beam caught multiple vessels as they tried to scatter, like shooting fish in a barrel. "You see, Commander," Kessler continued, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "We knew you'd come eventually, so we turned our entire planet into one big trap. Those particle beams, they create microscopic black holes that last just long enough to swallow whatever they touch. Pretty clever for primitives, wouldn't you say?" Rova stared at his tactical display in disbelief, as half his invasion force vanished in less than 10 minutes. The humans hadn't just prepared defenses, they'd weaponized theoretical physics. His mandibles drooped in shock as the full magnitude of his mistake became clear. "Full retreat," he ordered, his voice cracking. "All ships, emergency jump. Get us out of here now." As his surviving ships fled into hyperspace, Rovus heard Kessler's final words. "Next time, think twice before you underestimate primitive humans. We're full of nasty surprises." The retreating fleet barely managed to regroup, their numbers decimated, their confidence shattered. Valeran gripped the console, struggling to process the battle they had just lost. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. If brute force couldn't break humanity, perhaps a more insidious method could. A war fought not with ships, but with data. In a dimly lit command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Sarah Lindholm's fingers flew across her keyboards, creating a blur of motion. Screens covered the walls, showing the positions of thousands of alien ships above Earth, their formations shifting like schools of fish in a digital sea. Her team of hackers worked frantically around her, their faces lit by the blue glow of their displays, coffee cups and energy drink cans scattered across their workstations. "Their systems are more complex than we thought," one of her team members called out, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The encryption is adaptive. It's like fighting a living thing." Lindholm didn't look up from her work, her eyes locked on the scrolling code. "That's why we made our virus adaptive too. Keep pushing. We've trained for this." Captain Kessler stood behind her, his arms crossed, jaw clenched tight. "How much longer?" "Our ground forces can't hold them off forever." "Almost there," Lindholm muttered. She reached for her coffee cup, found it empty, and kept typing, her fingers never missing a beat. "Their ships all share the same base programming. Once we crack one, we crack them all, like dominoes waiting to fall." On the main screen, Valeran watched in growing horror as strange signals began spreading through the Confederacy fleet, little red warning lights blinking across his display. "Something is wrong," he reported to the High Command, his voice trembling. "Our systems are changing. The humans are doing something." Lindholm allowed herself a small smile as her virus found its way in, slipping through a crack in their defenses. "Got you," she whispered. The AI she'd created began its work, spreading from ship to ship like a digital wildfire, unstoppable and hungry. "What's happening?" Kessler asked, leaning forward, his breath fogging the nearest screen. "Watch," Lindholm said, pointing to the main display. "The fun's about to start." The first signs appeared in the smallest scout ships, their engines flickering with unnatural patterns. Their weapon systems activated without commands, humming to life like awakening beasts. Targeting computers locked onto nearby Confederacy vessels, identifying them as hostile targets. "By the ancestors," Valeran gasped as the first shots were fired, bright flashes lighting up the void. "Stop! Those are our own ships. This can't be happening." But no one could stop it. Lindholm's virus had taken control, turning the Confederacy's weapons against themselves. Ships began firing on their allies, their automated systems hijacked by Earth's digital attack, creating a deadly dance of friendly fire. The beauty of it, Lindholm explained to Kessler, her voice filled with professional pride, is that their own safety protocols are working against them. When they see their ships attacking, they fire back in self-defense. The virus doesn't even need to infect every vessel. They'll do half the work for us. Chaos erupted in space. Zalari ships scattered in panic, their crews unable to distinguish friend from foe. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes crisscrossed the void, striking their own fleet with devastating accuracy. The battlefield became a deadly light show of destruction. "This is impossible," Valeran shouted into his communicator, his composure completely shattered. "Shut down all systems, power down the weapons, someone must take control." But his orders came too late. The virus had spread too far, too fast, like a plague through their perfect fleet. Lindholm watched with grim satisfaction as the mighty Confederacy fleet tore itself apart, their own impressive firepower becoming their downfall. "Impossible," Valeran whispered, his pride shattered as he witnessed humanity's true power. "How could they do this to us? We were supposed to be invincible." In the command center, Kessler placed a hand on Lindholm's shoulder. "Good work," he said quietly, understanding the weight of the moment. Lindholm nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen showing the unfolding destruction. She had just turned the most powerful space fleet in known history against itself. Part of her marveled at the achievement, while another part wondered about the cost of such victory. The lights of dying ships reflected in her tired eyes, each flash a reminder of the lives being lost in this digital massacre. As the Confederacy reeled from their systems turning against them, Valeran tried to rally his forces. But while he worked to undo the cyber assault, Earth had already moved on to their next phase. High above the planet, the night sky burned as another devastating counterattack began. The humans weren't waiting to be invaded again. Captain Kessler watched in horror as the first energy beams sliced through Earth's atmosphere. The Zalari ships had begun their orbital bombardment, their weapons cutting bright lines across the night sky like angry neon scratches on a black canvas. "Multiple impacts detected in Asia and Europe, sir." Lieutenant Onaga's voice was tight with tension as she monitored the damage reports flooding in. "Civilian casualties. They're targeting population centers." Kessler grabbed the command console, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "Launch Operation Falling Star, now." Around the world, seemingly dead satellites suddenly sparked to life. Thousands of them, carefully positioned over decades, broke from their orbits. Their engines, hidden beneath fake solar panels, ignited with bright blue flames. Each one had been disguised as space junk, weather monitors, or communication relays, a deception years in the making. In his flagship, Commander Rovus laughed at the primitive defense satellites his ships were destroying. "These humans think their pitiful technology can—" He waved his hand dismissively at the tactical display. An alarm blared through his bridge. "Sir, multiple objects approaching at extreme velocity. They're everywhere." Rovus's smile vanished as he watched the sensor displays. The human satellites weren't running away. They were attacking. Each one had become a guided missile, accelerating to incredible speeds. Their fake casings fell away, revealing sleek weapons underneath. "Evasive action," he screamed, but it was too late. The first wave of satellites struck their targets like celestial hammers. Kinetic energy turned them into weapons more powerful than nuclear warheads. Zalari capital ships crumpled and exploded, their shields useless against the sheer momentum of the impacts. The void of space lit up with silent explosions. "Direct hits on multiple capital ships," Onaga reported, allowing herself a small smile. "The Chinese and Russian satellites are beginning their attack runs now. They're coordinating perfectly with ours." Kessler watched the tactical display as more and more enemy ships vanished in spectacular fireballs. Years of planning, thousands of satellites positioned under the guise of communications and weather monitoring were paying off. Each explosion felt like sweet revenge for the cities burning below. "Sir," Onaga's voice rose with excitement. The enemy fleet is breaking formation. They're retreating from low orbit. Their battle lines are completely shattered. On his flagship, now trailing debris and atmosphere, Rovus stared in disbelief at the destruction around him. Half his remaining fleet was gone, destroyed by what he had dismissed as primitive human technology. Warning lights flashed across his bridge as more systems failed. "All ships fall back to high orbit," he ordered, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "Maintain bombardment range, but get out of their weapons' reach. How did they hide this? How did we not see it?" But the satellites kept coming, their engines burning bright as they chased the retreating ships. Each impact sent shockwaves through space, turning mighty warships into expanding clouds of wreckage. The hunters had become the hunted. Kessler picked up his secure phone, allowing himself a grim smile. "This is the captain. Phase 1 is complete. Begin targeting their support ships. Let's show them what else we've been hiding." With the Confederacy fleet in chaos, Valeran expected the humans to negotiate, but no such offer came. Instead, they fought on, relentless, unyielding, as if surrender wasn't even an option. Watching his fleet dwindle, he began to realize the war was no longer about control. It was about survival. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if the Confederacy would survive at all. Valeran paced the command deck of the Celestial Accord, his claws clicking against the polished floor. The holographic displays showed the ongoing devastation on Earth's surface, yet something felt deeply wrong. "I don't understand," he muttered, drawing concerned looks from the other diplomats. "Why haven't they surrendered?" The humans' cities burned, their orbital defenses lay in ruins, and still they fought back with savage determination. It defied all logic. Every other species the Confederacy had encountered had yielded when faced with such overwhelming force. Commander Rovus stormed onto the deck, his scales dark with rage. "Another carrier group lost. These primitives are using their own satellites as weapons." "Perhaps," Valeran suggested carefully, "we should attempt negotiations again." "Negotiations?" Rovus spat. "While they destroy our ships?" A transmission cut through their argument. Captain Kessler's face appeared on the main screen, his expression unnervingly calm despite the chaos behind him. "I believe you're wondering why we haven't surrendered," Kessler said, his voice steady. "Let me explain something about humans. We don't fight like your other conquests." Valeran moved closer to the screen. "Your people are dying. Your cities burn. What could you possibly gain by continuing?" Kessler smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You think we're fighting for survival? That's where you're wrong. From the moment you threatened our world, this stopped being about survival. We're fighting to make sure you never threaten anyone else again." The truth hit Valeran like a physical blow. He looked at the battle statistics with new eyes. The humans weren't trying to drive them away or defend key positions. Every counterattack had been aimed at inflicting maximum damage to the Confederacy's forces. "Impossible," Rovus whispered, the same realization dawning on his face. "They're trying to destroy us completely." "Not trying," Kessler corrected. "Succeeding. You should have studied our history better. Humans don't believe in limited warfare. When we fight to win. Completely." Valeran's hands shook as he pulled up the casualty reports. The humans had lost millions, but the Confederacy had lost something far more precious: their belief in their own invincibility. And they were still losing ships at an alarming rate. "You're not just defending," Valeran said, his voice hollow. "You're hunting us." "Now you're getting it," Kessler replied. "We're not your prey. We're your extinction event." Valeran's hand shook as he watched the Confederacy forces attempt to regroup, but the humans had no intention of letting them recover. Just as the battered fleet tried to flee beyond Earth's reach, new enemy signals appeared on their sensors. Humanity wasn't content with defense anymore. They were preparing to go on the offensive. Valeran's thoughts were interrupted by blaring alarms. The command deck erupted into chaos as emergency lights flashed red. "Multiple human vessels detected," a junior officer shouted. "They're emerging from behind their moon." Commander Rova stormed onto the bridge, his scales dark with rage. "Impossible. We destroyed their space fleet." The main display showed hundreds of small ships appearing from Earth's dark side. They weren't the sleek warships the Confederacy had obliterated earlier. These were crude, hastily built vessels that looked like they'd been cobbled together from mining ships and cargo haulers. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced. Captain Kessler's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired but wore a grim smile. "Remember when I said humans don't surrender? Now you'll learn why." The makeshift human fleet accelerated toward them. Rovas laughed. "These primitive vessels are no match for our—" The words died in his throat as the human ships began to split apart. What looked like construction flaws were actually deliberate separation points. Each vessel broke into 3 smaller craft, tripling their numbers. "By the ancestors," Valeran whispered. "They built decoy ships inside their real ships." The human vessels opened fire. Instead of energy weapons, they launched clouds of what appeared to be space debris. Valeran's eyes widened as he realized what he was seeing. Millions of pieces of orbital trash collected and weaponized. "Evasive action!" Rova screamed, but it was too late. The debris cloud shredded through their shields, designed to stop energy weapons, not physical objects. Hull breaches erupted across multiple decks. "Admiral Onaga's task force is being overrun," someone shouted. "The humans are using their disabled ships as ramming weapons." The Celestial Accord shuddered as more impacts struck home. Valeran watched in horror as their supposedly invincible flagship began to break apart under the onslaught. "All hands abandon ship," Rovas ordered, his earlier arrogance replaced by naked fear. "Fall back to the secondary command vessel." As Valeran rushed toward the escape pods with Rovas, he heard Kessler's voice one final time over the failing comm system. "Welcome to humanity's way of war." The Celestial Accord's mighty engines died behind them as they fled, leaving their burning flagship to the mercy of Earth's vengeful defenders. The Confederacy fleet limped into deep space, battered and broken, their chain of command in disarray. Valeran had seen defeats before, but nothing like this. Before he could contemplate their next move, his tactical officer's voice cut through the silence. Earth's forces had vanished from their sensors, but they weren't retreating. They were hunting. Valeran slumped in his command chair as damage reports flooded in. The remnants of the once mighty Confederacy fleet limped through space, their ships battered and crews demoralized. "Status report," he demanded, his voice hoarse. 42% of our fleet is combat ready," his tactical officer reported. "The rest need extensive repairs. We've lost contact with 3 battle groups entirely." Rovas, his second in command, stepped forward. "We should regroup at the Nexus station. We can't risk losing more ships." On the main display, the scattered dots of surviving Confederacy vessels slowly converged. The humans had bloodied them badly, but they weren't finished yet. "The Council demands answers," Rovas said quietly. "They never expected such resistance." Valeran's reply was cut short by urgent beeping from the sensor station. "Sir, multiple jump signatures detected near the Sol system's edge." The tactical display updated, showing a massive formation of human warships, but instead of pursuing the retreating Confederacy forces, they were forming up into attack squadrons, pointing towards Zalari space. "They wouldn't dare," Valeran whispered, his eyes wide. "They can't possibly—" "Sir?" The communications officer's voice cracked. "We're receiving broadcast from the human fleet. They're transmitting on all frequencies." The message was simple, delivered in perfect Zalari. "You brought war to our home. Now we bring it to yours." Before their stunned eyes, the human fleet engaged their faster-than-light drives. The massive formation vanished in a flash of light, heading straight for the heart of Confederacy space. For the first time in their history, the Zalari would know what it felt like to have enemies in their own skies. "Send warning to all border worlds," Valeran ordered, his voice shaking. The humans are coming. Warnings spread across Confederacy-controlled space like wildfire, but it was already too late. Humanity's retaliation wasn't just a military strike, it was the unraveling of an empire. As Valeran received reports of rebellions and secessions, he realized the war was no longer about conquest. It was about survival, and the Confederacy was losing. Valeran watched the tactical display with growing dread as more red indicators flashed across the star map. Not just military installations now, civilian ports and trade stations were declaring independence from the Confederacy. Another transmission from the Kryloth Assembly, his communications officer announced. They're formally severing ties with the Confederacy. The news hit Valeran like a physical blow. The Kryloth were one of their oldest allies, a founding member of the Confederacy. Their departure would trigger a cascade effect. "Show me," he ordered. The screen filled with the image of First Speaker Taznil, her crystalline form gleaming under the assembly lights. "For too long we have accepted the Zalari's claims of superiority. The humans have shown us that the Confederacy's foundation is built on lies. We choose to stand with them, not as subjects, but as equals." Rovas hissed in anger. "Traitors, they dare side with those primitives?" But Valeran saw the truth in her words. More reports poured in. The Meridian Collective had opened trade negotiations with Earth. The Solari Republic was sharing defense technology with human engineers. "Sir," his tactical officer's voice shook, "the Vanguard worlds they're offering their shipyards to the human fleet." The Vanguard worlds, their most crucial military production center, now turning their vast industrial might to aid humanity. Valeran felt sick as he realized what this meant. The humans hadn't just defeated them in battle, they'd shattered the very idea of Zalari supremacy. "The humans never wanted our surrender," Valeran whispered. "They wanted to prove we were wrong. About everything." On his display, more systems blinked from green to red. The Confederacy wasn't just losing a war, it was watching its 1,000-year empire crumble as its former subjects chose to stand with humanity. A new transmission cut through his thoughts. The sender identification made his heart stop. It was from the Archon Assembly itself, the highest governing body of the Confederacy. The message was brief. Emergency session called. Topic: Recognition of Human Federation as sovereign power. Vote scheduled. Valeran closed his eyes. It was over. Not with the thunder of weapons, but with the quiet dignity of former vassals choosing a better path. Humanity had won not just through force of arms, but by offering something the Confederacy never had: genuine partnership. Even as diplomatic councils debated surrender, humanity's war machine remained unstoppable. The Confederacy had underestimated them before, but now they saw the truth. This wasn't retaliation. It was annihilation. Valeran barely had time to process the next wave of attacks before another world vanished from the star maps, erased from existence. Valeran stared in horror at the tactical display as another world, his homeworld, vanished in a blinding flash. The humans had somehow weaponized dark matter itself, creating artificial singularities that devoured entire planets. "Casualties?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Total population was 8 billion, his officer replied, mandibles trembling. "No survivors detected." Rovas burst onto the bridge, his usual composure shattered. "They hit 3 more colony worlds. The humans aren't just defeating us, they're erasing us from existence." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. When the Confederacy had launched their invasion of Earth, they'd expected a swift victory over a primitive species. Instead, they'd awakened something terrifying. "How?" Valeran asked. "How did we misjudge them so badly?" "We thought their limited space presence meant weakness," Rovas said. "We never considered they might have focused their research on weapons development instead of expansion." Another alert blared. The tactical display showed a human fleet emerging from faster-than-light travel near the Confederacy's most populous agricultural world. "No," Valeran whispered. Not there too. The human ships moved with terrifying precision, deploying their singularity weapons. The planet's surface began to crack and fold in on itself as space-time warped and twisted. Within minutes, another world vanished into nothingness, taking billions more lives with it. "Message from High Command," the communications officer announced, voice shaking. They're calling an emergency session of the Grand Council." Valeran knew what that meant. After millennia of dominance, after countless victories over other species, the mighty Confederacy was considering the unthinkable: surrender. "The humans aren't interested in conquest," Rovas said quietly. "They're not even interested in revenge anymore. They want extinction." Another alert. Another human fleet. Another world about to die. Valeran closed his eyes. "Send word to High Command. Tell them to hurry." Rovas gritted his teeth as the capital world's defenses fell, one by one. Their last stronghold, the heart of the Confederacy, was now under siege. Valeran clutched the edge of his command chair, knowing there was no escape. The humans had arrived at their doorstep, and they were here to finish what had been started. Commander Rovas paced in his command center on the Confederacy's capital world of Zelar Prime. His claws clicked against the polished floor as reports flooded in of Earth's forces approaching the system. "Impossible," he muttered, watching the tactical displays light up with hundreds of human warships. "They were primitives. They should have surrendered." An aide burst into the room, breathing hard. "Commander, the humans have breached the outer defense ring. They're using our own ships against us." Rovas snarled. The stolen vessels, captured during earlier battles and now crewed by humans and rebel aliens, were leading the charge. His own arrogance in underestimating humanity had led to this moment. The building shook as the first bombardment began. Through the window, he watched antimatter explosions light up the shield dome protecting the capital city. The barriers that had stood for 10,000 years were failing. "Get me the council," Rovas demanded, but the communications officer just shook his head. "They've evacuated, sir. They're blaming you for provoking the humans." Another explosion rocked the building. Warning sirens blared as the shield dome crackled and failed. Human dropships screamed through the gap, landing troops in the streets below. "Cowards," Rovas spat. "I served them loyally for decades. I conquered worlds for them." "Sir," his aide said quietly, "the humans are broadcasting terms. They want you, just you. They'll spare the capital if we hand you over." Rovas turned to see his own officers training weapons on him. Their faces showed grim determination mixed with fear. Not of him, but of what humanity would do if he escaped. "You can't do this. I am your commander." "You were," said his former aide, stepping forward with restraints. "But you chose this war, and now you'll answer for it." They marched him outside into the central plaza. Human troops parted to reveal Admiral Kessler waiting with a small delegation. The human's face was hard as stone. "Commander Rovas," Kessler said, his voice carrying across the silent plaza. "You were warned. You were given the chance to choose peace. Instead, you chose war." "You were beneath us," Rovas shouted. "You should have submitted." "And that arrogance is why you failed," Kessler replied. "Take him." As they led him away to face justice, Rovas finally understood. He had never truly known his enemy. He had seen their technology level and dismissed them. He had seen their divided nations and thought them weak. He had never understood that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their ships or their guns. It was their sheer, unstoppable determination to survive and win at any cost. The military tribunal was brief. His crimes were listed: unprovoked aggression, civilian casualties, illegal weapons deployment. The sentence was death. His last words were bitter. "I only did what any commander would do." "No," Admiral Kessler responded. "You did what an arrogant fool would do, and now you pay the price." The execution was carried out immediately. Commander Rovas, the architect of a war that had reshaped the galaxy, died as he had lived, completely failing to understand the species he had so fatally underestimated. As Rovas was led away in chains, Valeran stood motionless, watching the collapse of everything he had once believed unshakable. The once proud Confederacy was no more. But Earth did not claim their throne. Instead, they simply left. And with their departure, an unsettling question lingered in Valeran's mind. Why had they stopped? Through the cold, sterile halls of the diplomatic vessel, I made my way to the human delegation. My footsteps echoed against metal floors that once gleamed with pride, but now showed scorch marks from recent battles. The weight of my people's mistakes pressed down on my shoulders like a physical burden. The human guards watched me with blank faces as I approached. Their armor, which we once dismissed as primitive, now seemed to radiate menace. "I request an audience," I said, my voice smaller than I remembered it being. "Please." That last word felt foreign on my tongue. We Zalari never begged. But then again, we had never faced extinction before. The doors slid open to reveal Admiral Kessler. She sat behind a simple metal desk, her face carved from stone. The same woman I had once looked down upon now held the fate of my civilization in her hands. "Speak," she said. I swallowed hard. "The Confederacy seeks peace." "Peace?" She leaned forward, her eyes sharp as blade points. "Like the peace you offered us? The kind that came with chains?" "We were wrong," I admitted. The words tasted like ash. "Catastrophically wrong. About everything, about humans, about our place in the galaxy." My hands trembled as I spread them open. "We offer unconditional surrender." Kessler's laugh held no warmth. "Surrender isn't enough anymore." "Then what? What more can we give? Our worlds burn. Our fleets lie in ruins. Half our member species have already joined your side." My voice cracked. "We've lost everything." "Not everything." She stood up, walking around the desk. "Not yet." Fear crawled up my spine as she towered over me. How had we ever thought humans weak? "Please," I whispered. "We've learned our lesson. We'll pay reparations. We'll disarm. Anything you ask." "Here's what we want," Kessler said. "Total withdrawal. Every ship, every soldier, every piece of Confederacy technology, gone from human space. All of it. A buffer zone of 50 light years around Earth and all human colonies." "But that would leave us defenseless against..." "Against what?" She cut me off. "The monsters you warned us about? The threats you said only the Confederacy could protect against?" Her smile was razor sharp. "We've seen the truth in your archives. There are no monsters out there except the ones you created." I slumped in my chair. She was right. The Confederacy had manufactured threats for centuries to keep its member species in line. Now those lies were coming back to destroy us. "How long?" I asked. "1 standard week to begin withdrawal, 1 month to complete it." She sat back down. "After that, any Confederacy presence in human space will be considered an act of war. And if we refuse, then we finish what you started." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And this time we won't stop until there's nothing left." The silence that followed felt endless. I thought of my homeworld, of the billions who still live there, of all the worlds that would burn if we refused. "I'll convey your terms to what remains of our leadership," I said, rising on shaky legs. As I turned to leave, Kessler spoke one last time. "Valeran." I paused. "Remember this moment, remember why it happened. Because if your people ever think of threatening Earth again..." She let the words hang in the air. She didn't need to finish. I understood perfectly. We all did now. Days turned into weeks as the Confederacy remnants struggled to reorganize. The humans had left, but their warning echoed across every surviving world. Valeran knew he had to understand their motives, and so, with a single transmission, he sought the answer to a question that haunted them all. Why did humanity let them live? Through the cold, sterile halls of the diplomatic vessel, I made my way to the human delegation. My footsteps echoed against metal floors that once gleamed with pride but now showed scorch marks from recent battles. The weight of my people's mistakes pressed down on my shoulders like a physical burden. The human guards watched me with blank faces as I approached. Their armor, which we once dismissed as primitive, now seemed to radiate menace. "I request an audience," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay composed. They led me into a stark meeting chamber. Admiral Kessler sat at the head of the table, her face as unyielding as steel. The same woman who had warned us months ago now held the fate of my civilization in her hands. "You have our surrender terms," she said flatly. "There will be no negotiation." I pulled up the document on my datapad, though I'd memorized every word. Complete withdrawal from human space, dismantling of our military vessels, reparations. My voice cracked. "These terms will destroy us." "No." Kessler's eyes bore into mine. "Your arrogance destroyed you. Your choice to attack us destroyed you. We're merely finishing what you started." She stood, and even though I towered over her, I felt small. "Here is humanity's final message to the Confederacy. You have 48 hours to begin withdrawal. Any resistance will be met with total annihilation. We won't stop at military targets. We won't show mercy to civilian worlds. You wanted to see humanity's true nature? This is it. We don't fight to survive. We fight to win." The words hit me like physical blows. I remembered our early reports, dismissing humans as primitive, believing their lack of unified government made them weak. How wrong we'd been. "The withdrawal begins now," I whispered. As I left the chamber, I caught sight of my reflection in a darkened view screen. My proud Zalari features, once considered marks of an advanced species, now seemed like relics of a civilization that had sealed its own doom. The war ended that day, but as our ships retreated from human space, as our military dismantled its fleets, as our world struggled to pay crushing reparations, something else remained: fear. Fear of the species that hadn't just defeated us, they had broken us. Fear of the humans who, when pushed to war, fought not for survival, but for absolute victory. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. The silence that followed Earth's final message was deafening. Valeran wandered through the ruins of Zelara Prime, watching his people struggle to find purpose in their shattered existence. There was no treaty, no occupation, just a void where their power had once stood. The Confederacy had fallen, and the galaxy had moved on without them. I walked through the broken streets of Zelara Prime, my feet crunching on shattered crystal and twisted metal. The golden spires that once pierced the clouds now lay toppled like fallen giants. The air still smelled of smoke and defeat. My heart ached as I passed the ruins of the Grand Archive, where countless generations of knowledge had been stored. Now it was just a blackened crater. The sight of children's toys scattered among the rubble made my throat tight. "Ambassador Valeran," a weak voice called out. I turned to see Council Member Tyvari, once proud and elegant, now dirty and trembling. "They're waiting for you in the emergency bunker." The underground chamber that had once been our last resort was now our only refuge. As I descended the stairs, I saw what remained of our leadership, scared faces in torn robes, huddled around a flickering hollow table. "The humans." High Counselor Marith's voice cracked. "They've accepted our surrender. We must sign immediately, before they change their minds." I looked at the terms displayed before us: complete withdrawal from human space, dismantling of our military vessels, restrictions on future space travel. The proud Zalari civilization, reduced to begging for scraps. "How did we fail so completely?" someone whispered. A message flashed across every working screen in the bunker. The humans' final warning, broadcasting across our ruined worlds. "Never return to Earth. This was your only warning." "They're leaving," another council member said in disbelief. They don't even want to occupy our worlds. They just wanted to destroy us. I watched my fellow Zolari, beings who once thought violence beneath them, sign away our future with shaking hands. We had started this war thinking we were teaching primitive barbarians a lesson. Instead, we learned one ourselves, about pride, about assumptions, and about the terrible price of underestimating humanity. The humans' ships were already pulling back from our orbit, leaving us to rebuild from the ashes of our arrogance. They didn't need to stay. The message had been delivered, written in the ruins of our civilization. The Confederacy's collapse sent ripples across the galaxy, changing the political landscape forever. One by one, former vassal states abandoned their old rulers, seeking new alliances. But they didn't turn to the remnants of the Zolari. They turned to humanity. Valeran watched in bitter silence as a new power emerged, one that had no interest in ruling, yet commanded absolute fear. I stood at the observation deck of my small diplomatic vessel, watching the once mighty Confederacy crumble. The news feeds were overwhelming. Dozens of species we'd ruled over for centuries were breaking free, some with violence, others with simple declarations of independence. Sir, my aide's voice shook, the Cathara system they've pledged themselves to Earth. I turned away from the viewport. Earth didn't conquer them. No, sir, they chose it. They're calling humans the Void Walkers now, the ones who strike without warning and vanish just as quickly. On world after world, I saw the same pattern. The Marini, once our most loyal servants, had transformed their central plaza into a shrine to human military might. The Zethra, a species we'd kept as agricultural slaves, now flew Earth's flag alongside their own, not as subjects, but as willing allies. Humanity refuses to rule them, I said softly, remembering the message Earth had broadcast. They don't want an empire. The Drachnid sector tried to resist the changes, my aide reported. They've gone silent. No communications for 3 days. I felt a chill. We all knew what that meant. On Kithra Prime, I walked through streets filled with new artwork, murals depicting human warships as angels of death. Children played games pretending to be Terran soldiers. Their parents spoke in hushed tones about the warning, how humans had shown what happens to those who choose war. The Terran Accord grows stronger each day, my aide said, reviewing reports. 17 species have joined voluntarily, not because humans conquered them, but because they're terrified of being next, I finished. They saw what happened to us and chose a different path. The humans had become something more than real. They were becoming legend. Stories spread across the galaxy of the species that emerged from nowhere, shattered an empire that had stood for thousands of years and then simply left. A group of Kithra children ran past me, chanting an already popular rhyme. From the void they come at night, to teach the warmongers wrong from right. My aide handed me another report. 3 more sectors had declared for Earth. Not through conquest, not through force, but through fear and respect for a power that had shown both perfect violence and perfect restraint. They're calling them the teachers now, my aide said quietly. The ones who showed the galaxy that peace isn't just an option, it's the only option for survival. In the depths of uncharted space, the last survivors of the Zolari gathered in exile. They had once ruled 1,000 worlds. Now they clung to a single forgotten planet. Valeran thought they had escaped the humans' wrath, that they had found a place to rebuild. But then they saw the message carved into the rock, and they knew Earth had already been here. I followed the encrypted coordinates through 3 different jump points, each one taking us further from known space. The colony ship ahead of me carried the last 200 members of the Zolari Council, once the mighty rulers of half the galaxy, now refugees running from their own shadows. The planet came into view, a blue-green world with 2 moons, perfect for our biology, hidden from all major trade routes. As I landed my ship, I saw the makeshift shelters already being erected. The sight made my stomach turn. The mighty Zalari reduced to building huts with their own hands. Valeran, Elder Sora greeted me, her once pristine robes now dirty and torn. We feared you wouldn't join us. I looked around at my people. Their eyes were hollow, their movements jerky with fear. Children huddled close to their parents, jumping at every sound. These weren't the proud diplomats and scholars I'd known. These were broken beings. We can rebuild here, one of the council members announced, his voice trying to sound confident but failing. Humanity will forget about us. In time we can... Sir! A young scout came running down from a nearby hill, his face pale. You need to see this. I followed the group up the rocky path. There, carved into an ancient rock face, were words in our own script. The letters were precise, deep, and unmistakable. My hands shook as I read them. We were here. We let you live. Do not test us again. Elder Sora collapsed to her knees, a wail of despair escaping her lips. The others stood frozen, staring at the message. How? Someone whispered. When? But we all knew it didn't matter. The humans had found our sanctuary before we even arrived. They could have wiped us out completely. Instead, they left us this message, a reminder that our very existence was now their choice, not ours. The last fragments of our pride crumbled as we stood there, staring at those carved words. We weren't even worthy of destruction anymore. We were being kept alive as a warning to others. I touched the carved letters, feeling their depth. This was humanity's true power, not just their ability to destroy, but their ability to terrify even when they showed mercy. Days turned into years, but the fear never faded. Valeran could feel it in every hushed conversation, in every wary glance toward the sky. No one spoke of war anymore, only of survival. And then, one day, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, he sent the message that had haunted him since the war ended. Why did humanity stop? From my quarters in the colony outpost, I stared at the communication console. My fingers hovered over the controls, trembling. After weeks of debate with myself, I had to know. I input the old diplomatic frequency, one that hadn't been used since our first contact with Earth. The message was simple, but it had kept me awake for countless nights. This is Valeran, former chief diplomat of the Confederacy. I must know. Why did you let us live? Why did you stop? The words hung in space, traveling across the vast emptiness between worlds. I waited, watching the console every day, barely eating or sleeping. The question consumed me. Days passed in silence. I began to think no answer would come. Then on the 7th day, the console lit up. A human voice filled my quarters, steady, neither angry nor friendly, just matter of fact. We do not seek war. But if you bring it to us again, there will be no survivors next time. That was all. No demands for tribute, no rules for our exile, no gloating over their victory, just a simple truth, delivered with absolute certainty. I sat back in my chair, understanding finally washing over me. They hadn't fought us to rule the galaxy. They hadn't even fought us to win. They had fought to make sure they would never have to fight again. In that moment, I realized that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their ships or their AI or their devastating tactics. It was their absolute commitment to making sure that no one would ever threaten them again. The answer was short, simple, and absolute. Valeran stared at the screen long after the transmission ended, feeling a weight settle over him. The humans had no interest in ruling them. They had no interest in vengeance. They had simply ensured that no one would ever challenge them again, and in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. From my quarters in the colony outpost, I stare at the data streams flowing across my screen. Reports from 100 worlds tell the same story. Everything has changed. The Mithrani, once proud allies of the Confederacy, now send weekly tributes to Earth. They never received a response, but they keep sending them. Fear does strange things to people. Ambassador Valarin, my aide calls from the doorway. The Krelthor delegation requests your counsel. I wave them in. 3 representatives enter, their scaled bodies trembling slightly. The Krelthor were warriors once before we civilized them. Now they're as scared as the rest of us. We wish to establish trade with the humans, the lead delegate says. You know them better than most. I almost laugh. Know them? None of us knew them. That was the problem. They don't want your trade, I tell them. They don't want anything from us. That's what makes them so terrifying. On my screen, more reports flow in. The Jovari have completely erased all mention of the war from their historical records. The Pentarch worlds have turned their defeat into a religion, worshipping the dark angels of Terra who punish the wicked. But surely they must want something, another delegate insists. Power? Resources? Territory? I shake my head. They wanted to be left alone, we didn't listen. Now everyone listens. After the delegates leave, I pull up the latest star charts. Where the Confederacy once ruled, dozens of small alliances have sprouted. But they're different now, cautious. Every treaty includes the same clause. All actions must avoid provoking Earth. Some species, like the Escherine, have tried to copy human military tactics. Others, like my own people, hide in the shadows. But we all know the truth. We're alive because they allowed it. A message flashes across my screen. Another former Confederacy world has petitioned Earth for protection. They'll receive no answer, just like all the others. Humanity has returned to their world, a shadow that looms over us all. We thought they were an anomaly. I whisper to myself, watching the stars. They were not. They were inevitable. The galaxy spins on, but it's different now. We no longer rule through peace. We survive through fear. Not fear of conquest or domination, but fear of awakening something that should have been left alone. And somewhere out there, Earth continues its silent watch. Neither threatening nor promising, simply existing. A reminder of what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. Decades had passed, but Earth's warning still echoed across the stars. New alliances formed, old governments crumbled. Yet one unspoken rule remained. Do not provoke humanity. Valarin watched as the younger races dismissed the old fears, claiming Earth had withdrawn into isolation. But he knew better. The humans were still out there, watching, waiting. And should war ever come again, there would be no survivors. Through the window of my small dwelling on the colony world of New Haven, I watch the stars shimmer in the night sky. 50 years have passed since the war that broke the Confederacy, yet Earth's shadow still looms over us all. Humanity did something none of us expected after their victory. They simply went home. No expansion, no empire building, no grand speeches about a new order. They returned to their world and closed their borders. The Terran Accord became a zone of silence. Ships that ventured too close vanished without a trace. No debris, no distress calls, just gone. I touch the wrinkled skin of my face, feeling the weight of years and memories. Around me, the galaxy changed. New alliances formed, trade routes shifted. Empires rose from the ashes of the old order. But one rule remained constant, whispered in every spaceport and council chamber. Do not test the humans. Some younger species mock these warnings now. They see Earth's isolation as weakness. But those of us who remember, we know better. We remember the last broadcast, the final warning that still echoes through subspace channels. We do not seek war, but if you bring it to us again, there will be no survivors next time. From my window, I can see the lights of the settlement below. Refugees and survivors, building new lives far from their ruined homes. Sometimes, late at night, they share stories of the war. Each telling grows more fantastic. Humans who could bend space, ships that appeared from nowhere, weapons that defied physics. But I know the truth is far simpler and far more terrifying. They were just humans, being human. A flash of movement catches my eye. High above, a sleek shape cuts through the starfield, angular, predatory, unmistakably human in design. My breath catches in my throat. For a moment, the warship hangs there, a dark reminder that Earth still watches. Then, without a sound, it vanishes into the void. A shiver runs down my spine as I realize the truth I've spent decades trying to understand. They were never just another species. They were a force of nature. If you enjoyed the story of Jonathan, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.